So let me show you the tools. How many of you have been to Epcot? Raise your hands if you've been to Epcot. Been to Disney? Okay. Epcot, you know what that is, and they use 4,000 of these boards to come up with Epcot. So that's how Disney, they filled these boards with ideas, okay? So the two basic tools are these boards, and these are the folding boards. And we just use them on easels. And we use these long pins. And we have all these cards. So if you've broken these apart, what I'd like you to do horizontally is print for me, and I'll just tell each of you what I would like, but would you print on a blue card and print? So I'm just going to show you how you form the boards. And one of the things I would tell you, it's a big selling point for me, is I, early on in my career, came to dislike flip chart paper because when you see people use flip chart paper, it gets messy. If you don't like something, you cross it out. They're hard to read and type up. These are much better. So I can get about 10 flip charts of information on one board. That's one of the things I like about it. And then we type the boards up. We photograph them, and then we type them up, usually using Excel. This is a new board, and so it's not broken in yet. So this is what's called a topic card. So if you write topic card on a blue one, I have done this with 200 people in a room. It's designed for 8 to 12. I routinely do it with 20 to 30. I've broken every rule in the book with it, and it still works. So, okay, so these are called headers, and that's a term that comes from the newspaper industry. And the topic card, what we're focused on is the cover of the book. It's the name of the book. The header are the name of the chapters in the book. The topic card is like the cover of the book. And tonight we're talking about the Minnesota Compression Planning Institute. The header is the chapter title. And so I have several headers to put up. So one of the things that we want to do at the beginning of every session is we want to do some background. And so we could have taken I could have said, I'm Peter Hughes, my name. We could have put up what I do, and could have put all the information you gave me, and we now have background on who's in the room. But if it were a project like a car wash that you're going to see, you're going to see what they do for background. So one of the things we often do that you don't see in many meetings, you'll see the charge, and that's the kind of thing that's come from the lean world or the quality improvement. So what's the overall purpose? So if I do a strategic planning process, what are the overall purpose? I'm going to list several objectives we have for the overall purpose. But then if I'm holding a retreat of leadership, I'm going to say, so what's the purpose of this session? And then I want everybody to know what's the big picture. Now why are we here today? And lay that out. So we're now getting focused, okay? So these are headers, and so they're the chapter titles. If we're going to talk about the purpose of the session, we may want to talk about the non-purpose of the session. So what is it we're not going to talk about? How many meetings have you been in when people have derailed the meeting because they wanted to talk about other things than what was on the agenda? Because they had an agenda of their own, they wanted to kill whatever you were trying to talk about, or they just simply, because of the way they are, they just simply diluted it and took us off in a different direction. So if tonight we're not going to talk about lean, we're not going to talk about performance improvement. We're not going to talk about other facilitation techniques, so we're not going to go there. If we're talking about our master facility campus plan, we're not going to talk about the last plan we did 5 years ago. This is the new plan. So we kind of talk about what is it we're not going to focus on. And then, of course, I'm going to have my ground rules. And I would have those things like, well, write down on a yellow card, suspend judgment. On a green card, write, bite your tongue. Write on a yellow card, Jefferson rule of spelling. On a yellow card, all ideas are welcome. And I'll stop there and we'll just put those up. So these are the subbers. The subbers represent the content in the chapter. And the siders are the footnotes. So if you said programs in engineering, we could list the programs in engineering that relate to our subject. You're the engineering right? And we'd list those. That's how we'd use the footnotes. So here's the topic we're focused on, the book cover. Here's the header. Here's the specific chapter in the book. Here's the content that goes with that chapter, and here's the footnotes that go with that yellow card. So you see the visual, but if I do this on flip chart paper, you don't get this hierarchy that easy to follow. So you've got the rules. So if I had ground rules, and I usually come in with some, and then I ask the team to help create their own rules. So we want people to understand all ideas are welcome. When I'm facilitating, I want engagement and I want inclusion. I don't want to shut anybody out. I want a level playing field. And I think this process really levels a playing field. It really helps every one of you have a voice. What happens in groups? I'm a sociologist and urban planner by training, so I know a little bit about group behavior. Cliques form, you three form, you're a clique. You dominate the conversation. These two poor souls can't get a word in edgewise. Or you're very dominant, shutting everybody else down. So as a facilitator, my job is to hear from all of you. And if we have ground rules and we have things like bite your tongue, suspend judgment, etc., that we help that. So suspend judgment, and remember I said, I'm supposed to be facing the camera, bite your tongue. It just is a reminder. People laugh when you hear that. I did that to one of the sisters in one of our meetings, and everybody afterwards told me that was the best thing in the whole meeting when you said that to Sister Mary Schwinn, or whatever her name was. But it reminded the people they've got to let other people have a space to speak and talk. The Jefferson rule of spelling. Thomas Jefferson didn't respect anybody, couldn't spell the same word 3 different ways. So that usually gets a laugh. People relax and they start engaging. And I have a few other things like that, but that's what I try to do. So you can see how these boards start forming. Now, one of the things that we want to do, if you'll just put on a pink card, provocative idea number 1, provocative idea number 2, provocative idea number 3 on pink cards. Okay? So one of the real hallmarks of this process is well, it sounds like a no-brainer. It sounds like a statement of the obvious, that we have to plan our session. You know, it's like coming to a meeting without an agenda, but how many of you come into meetings without agendas? And what happens to the meeting often? Not very focused. Well, again, the quality improvement world has kind of moved a lot of us to doing that. But in compression planning, we spend a lot of time on design. So if you're my client and you have a project you want me to help you with, I'm going to sit down with you and intake you, and I have a whole series of questions to find out what it is you want to accomplish. And then once we know that, we're going to then try to come up with really provocative headers to get people to unleash their ideas. So we may want to say, what would success look like? What if money were not an object? You know, what would you do if you didn't have money to worry about? Because if you can come up with that idea, you might be able to back into it to figure out, well, okay, we do have money issues, but here's the vision we have. What would it take to knock the socks off our competitors? If I were our competitor, what would I do? Those are the kind of provocative headers. So that is, but they're all very focused on the goals that she and I developed for her process, because I'm working for her. And she's got specific things, and we can come to agreements on these provocative headers because we want them to generate ideas. Now, they may not always be provocative. It depends on the process, but this is what is very powerful about this process. And so what you're seeing is the formation of a board. And this is what you do when you compression plan. And you lead people and you fill these boards. In a 4-hour session, I can fill 8 to 10 boards. And then they get typed up just the way you see them, and everybody who's in the meeting gets them, so it's completely transparent. I'm real big on that, transparency and inclusion. And everybody gets to see what the work product was. In fact, I take pictures of all of you doing this, and then I drop them into the planning document. Because it reinforces that this wasn't done by me or you, it was done by a whole team.